With a Fox News alert, this Friday, the Secretary of Defense is expected to announce what is a vaccine mandate for all 1.3 million members of the U.S. military. Coming up, we're going to break down all the latest COVID-19 rules, mandates, orders, threats coming from Democrats that said, get the vaccine and life's going to return to normal. Get ready for your vaccine mandates, your mask mandates, draconian measures like never before. This is now real. Also tonight, well, playing a weird slideshow of different people hugging and kissing each other, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is tonight refusing to resign. This, as the governor, might soon face impeachment, but we will explain why that is not his greatest threat. His greatest fear should be tonight the real possibility of serious criminal charges. That threat is real. And according to a major breaking report, the New York State legislature now appears to have the votes to remove Cuomo from office. We'll have all the latest details straight ahead. And then later, Missouri's governor, right here on this program, pardoned. He had promised a pardon to the McCloskeys, who were forced to surrender their guns, pay a hefty fine, and plead guilty to misdemeanor charges, all for defending their home last year during what was a riot, and people broke down the gates of their neighborhood and threatened them. Now, Congressman, we'll have the latest on that. Mr. McCloskey will join us now. By the way, Congresswoman Cori Bush appears to be openly threatening the couple. Mark McCloskey, he's decided to run for Senate, so we have a lot of news. He'll join us tonight. But first, medical expert Dr. Bill Comrade de Blasio is now demanding in New York City that the people of New York City follow his strict new COVID-19 guidelines, or they risk losing their freedom, that their freedom will be taken away. Pay close attention to what he says here.
The Delta variant has changed the game. Unless we want to run the risk of going back to restrictions and having our freedom taken away and people losing their jobs again, it's really clear what we have to do. So here's a clear message. We're saying you want to go and enjoy great restaurants? Amen. You want to go to movie theaters, go to the gym? That's great. We want all that. You got to get vaccinated. You want to work in those places? You got to get vaccinated for the good and the health of everyone around you as well. It's not that tough to do.
He says you're going to risk losing your freedom. Well, that's kind of strange because his measure takes away everybody's freedom. And by the way, Comrade de Blasio, our rights actually come from God, the creator, of everything, not from you, Comrade Bill de Blasio. But apparently Bill thinks he knows best. He's a New York politician and a failure at that, after all. So forget about consulting with your doctor or medical privacy or patient-doctor confidentiality. If you don't follow Comrade de Blasio's rules in New York City and get vaccinated and present your papers to anyone who requests it, you will no longer be allowed to enter a restaurant, a gym, see a movie, Broadway show, go to a concert, nothing. You will be shut out. Show us your papers, get the vaccine mandated, or you're out. What about people that have rare conditions who can't get the vaccine because their doctors tell them that it would harm them? What about those that had COVID? If we're following the science, the Cleveland Clinic says, very prestigious medical institution, that if you had COVID-19, you don't need any of the vaccines. What happened to follow the science, that mantra? But now, as de Blasio just mentioned, we don't follow his orders. All of your precious freedom not only could be stripped away, but he's stripping it away anyway at the drop of a hat. A perfect example of why it's never a good idea to elect a devout, socialist, Marxist, communist, authoritarian figure like Bill de Blasio. And it's not just him. At Biden's request now, Democrats across the country, they're eagerly implementing new mask mandates. What happened if you get vaccinated? Life goes back to normal. They're now mandating vaccine requirements and vaccine passports, social distancing even for kids in school, restrictions on all businesses, and breaking tonight, as we reported at the top, well, now our Pentagon will soon announce a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for every single member of our military, whether they want it or not. And Los Angeles, by the way, they might soon mandate vaccine passports, just like New York. And get this, yesterday, we had this genius that runs the NIH, their director, actually encouraging parents at home that have children that you must put your masks on at home inside your house. Okay, we are now dealing with lunatics. These are the same people that said, if you got the vaccine, life goes back to normal. Are you going to believe them now? Because they lied to us, because that never happened. And clearly they don't believe in something called freedom. But if you question the so-called experts, you oppose the government mandates, you're guilty of killing people, according to New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, another idiot with one of those executive orders putting COVID-positive people in nursing homes. Take a look.
These folks back there have lost their mind. You've lost your minds. You are the ultimate knuckleheads, and because of what you are saying and standing for, people are losing their life. People are losing their life, and you have to know that. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror.
Did you, Governor, or did you not sign an executive order forcing nursing homes to take COVID-positive patients? We're going to get lectures from you? Without a doubt, the dramatic lectures from the left are once again ramping up. At the same time, they're not going to say a word about the biggest super spreader event that has been ongoing since January 20th, right at our own southern border, the Biden super spreader. The state of disaster has now been declared in McAllen, Texas. Why? Because 7,000 COVID-positive illegal immigrants were released into that one city alone, including 1,500 just this past week. This is now more than 1 million illegal immigrants were apprehended at the border. We're now at a 25-year high when we were at a 25-year low with Donald Trump's border policy. Now, we have no idea how many more were not intercepted by law enforcement. A record number of illegal immigrants from all over the world, many with COVID, none of them being tested, nobody's being vaccinated, no mandates for them. And they're now being dispersed in buses and planes to every state in the country. And they're all being paid for by you, courtesy of Joe Biden. But if you turn on fake news CNN or MSDNC or ABC, NBC, CBS, or read the New York Times and Washington Post, you're not going to hear anything about this massive super spreader event. They didn't tell you about Joe's cages for kids in the middle of a pandemic that were overcrowded and they're on top of each other. Yeah, in the middle of a pandemic with a high rate of COVID positivity. But according to the mob, the media, big tech, the Biden administration, well, Governor Ron DeSantis, let's blame him. The guy whose schools have been open now for a full year, we're going to blame him? All because, why? He's not going to force 3-year-olds to wear masks? And today, Governor DeSantis, guess what? He had this powerful response for Joe Biden, and circle back, Jen Psaki. Take a look.
Joe Biden has taken to himself to try to single out Florida over COVID. This is a guy who ran for president saying he was going to, quote, shut down the virus. And what has he done? He's imported more virus from around the world by having a wide open southern border. Biden, he rejects science because he denies the fact that people that recover from COVID have long-lasting immunity. And that's been proven time and time again, and the data is very clear. So if you're trying to restrict people, impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small business, if you are trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way, and I'm standing for the people of Florida. So why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.
Well said. And by the way, it was Governor DeSantis. He mobilized early. Every single sector of his government to focus on the most vulnerable, the elderly population in Florida, to protect them, unlike New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, where they were putting COVID-positive patients in nursing homes and killing the most vulnerable population. The Biden administration's actually concerned with the spread of COVID. Close the border, Joe. Close the border. That's the biggest super spreader. You're responsible for the biggest super spreader event in the entire history of the COVID pandemic in this country. That would prevent thousands of unvaccinated illegal immigrants that you're processing every day by not literally enforcing the laws of the land from pouring across our borders illegally. That would stop those infected with COVID-19 from getting into the country, likely infecting American citizens that you keep giving conflicting messages to. But clearly trashing Governor DeSantis is more important to Joe Biden. Joining us now with the full report, what is a very real crisis at our southern border. Again, our own Bill Melugin is there. Well, you know, it was your drone shot. We saw all these, hundreds of people underneath the bridge the other night. The reality is, I'm hearing from my sources on the Border Patrol and people every day that the numbers of positive COVID cases of illegal immigrants are through the roof.
Yeah, Sean, they are. And just to give you an idea of how bad things are getting down here, the city of McAllen has declared a local disaster. And you can see over my shoulder, they just built this emergency tent shelter literally overnight. This was not here as of 5 p.m. last night. And what this is they say they're housing illegal immigrants who have been released from Border Patrol custody. They say the feds are essentially just dumping illegal immigrants into the city of McAllen, and they don't have the space to put them anywhere anymore, so they had to build these emergency shelters. Take a look at this video we shot here earlier today. When we first found out about this tent compound, you can see there was a group of about 100 migrants who quickly showed up. They get services here, food, water, that sort of thing. There's a couple EMS tents where they get health checks, that sort of a thing. But the city is essentially saying the feds have been dumping so many migrants, dropping them off at this Catholic charity in downtown McAllen. The charity is completely over capacity, so there's a risk of hundreds of migrants just being left out on the streets of McAllen. And the city put out a scathing statement towards the federal government today. Take a look at this. They write in part, quote, "The city intends to demand relief from the federal government for the alarming number of migrants that are being released into the city of McAllen." They also say, as these immigrants are released, the federal government does not test them for COVID-19. Well, who does test them? It's a third party who does it. Once they're dropped off in downtown McAllen, a third party tests them. And take a look at this staggering stat right here, also reported by the city of McAllen. They say immigrants released into McAllen by the federal government, there have been more than 7,000 COVID-19 positive migrants in the McAllen area since February, 1,500 of which were just in the last week alone. We talked to some local residents out here who are not thrilled about this tent compound. Take a listen to what one had to say.
There's probably not enough planes or buses to get all these people out of here. And this is probably an overflow from the rest of the center. And we get that too. But again, there probably could have been a better location than sticking it right smack in the middle of McAllen.
And back out here live, you can take a look at our Fox drone right now. There are protesters out here who have been gathering this evening. They are not happy with the location of this tent. They're holding up American flags, holding up signs that say impeach Biden. They say the city never gave them a heads up and it's unacceptable to have this here. Well, I just got an email from the city. They might have heard some of that backlash because they just announced they're going to be moving this tent compound to county property that's over by Border Patrol jurisdiction instead. Sean, one last thing to mention to you. Earlier this evening, there was a horrific crash in Brooks County near the Falfurrias Border Patrol checkpoint about an hour north of us. There was a van that was apparently smuggling 30 illegal immigrants. The driver crashed, hit a pole. 10 people are dead right now. 20 are hospitalized. There was no pursuit, just a horrible, tragic incident. And it just goes to show one of the many facets of this ongoing border crisis down here, which is not getting better anytime soon. We'll send it back to you.
And Governor Abbott tried to stop that. And guess what? A court prevented him from stopping it. Bill, great report. Thank you. Here now, joining us with reaction, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, you've been down there. You've been warning everybody how bad it is. This is the biggest super spreader in the country. Now, I'm going to argue, the high rate of COVID positivity at that border. Any American that is infected because Joe's not enforcing the laws of this country, you can blame Joe Biden for COVID. And if you die, I would put the blame on him, too. Why won't they stop this super spreader event? Because it's happening in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Sean, you're exactly right. People across the state of Texas, across the country, are pissed and should be pissed. People are dying, and Joe Biden doesn't care. Kids are getting assaulted, sexually assaulted, raped, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't care. We've had over 1 million illegal immigrants in the last 6 months under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they don't care. You take the city of McAllen, releasing 7,000 illegal immigrants into McAllen, all of whom are positive with COVID. And I put that in perspective. McAllen is a city, its population is about 141,000. That means 5% of the population of the city consists now of illegal immigrants who've tested positive for COVID that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are just dumping there, one after the other, because they won't enforce the law. And instead, what does Joe Biden do? He lectures the state of Texas. He lectures the state of Florida. He cannot stand that our states are open. He cannot stand that our schools have been open. He cannot stand that people are going back to work. He wants to get back to the jackbooted thugs. You had on Bill de Blasio this morning, I got to say, or earlier tonight, if the jackboot fits, these Democrats, they want to shut down your business. They want to shut down your church. They want to shut down your school. They want to force you to get mandated. And all of this is wrong.
For Americans, it's vaccine mandates, it's mask mandates, it's vaccine passports. But for Joe's illegal immigrant population, is no testing, high rates of COVID positivity. Then you get to they're spreading it out all over the country, and basically nobody gets a vaccine, nobody gets a test. They get processed, they get then taken care of by the states. States are responsible for food and shelter, education and health care. Is that about right, Senator?
That's right, but it's even worse than that. The Biden cages where they temporarily detain these folks, I've been to them in these tent cities where you have thousands upon thousands of kids packed in on top of each other, crammed in unsafe cages. When I was there a couple of months ago, I brought 19 senators with me to see firsthand what was there. The rate of COVID positivity was over 10%. These Biden cages filled with kids are COVID incubators. And all of these folks that lecture self-righteously about science, they don't give a flip about science because they wouldn't be doing this if they did. They care
Senator,
about power and control. Yeah.
If it wasn't for you, they wouldn't let my cameras in those facilities. You got that videotape. You shared it with this program. And if it wasn't for you and a few others, we wouldn't have been able to show Biden's overcrowded cages with kids on top of each other in the middle of a pandemic with no testing. But we'll take away the rights of every American. Whatever happened to medical privacy, doctor-patient confidentiality? You've argued before the Supreme Court with a pretty high percentage of winning many times, Senator. You tell me, does that sound constitutional to you?
Look, it doesn't. The left doesn't believe in your privacy. It doesn't believe in your freedom. And they try to portray it as an extreme choice. They say if you think people should have individual choice, then you don't believe in science and you want everyone to die. No, look, I believe in science. You believe in science. This is a dangerous disease. We've taken extraordinary steps to deal with it. When it comes to vaccines, I believe in vaccines. I've been vaccinated. My family's been vaccinated. But I believe in individual choice. I think you have a right to make a choice whether or not you want to take the vaccine. And you could measure the costs and benefits. And in my view, there should be no COVID mandates. That means no mask mandates. That means no vaccine mandates. That means no vaccine passports. And these authoritarian Democrats are wanting to mandate and force and stick a needle in your arm. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter if you think you need it. As you noted, they don't care if you've had COVID and have natural immunity. It's not about the science. It's about them controlling your lives and the contempt they have for individual Americans making choices for their own families. In times of crisis, someone's character is revealed, and I think Biden and Harris and Newsom and Cuomo and all of these Democrats have really revealed their characters.
Joe Biden's policy are causing Americans to get sick, and I think if you look at the percentages, some of them will die. Joe, stop your super spreader event. Enforce the laws and control the border. Senator Cruz, thank you for being with us. Here with more. Donald Trump Jr. is with us. You know, your dad put the travel ban in effect. He took a lot of heat for that, Don. Your dad was able to get not one, not two, but 3 vaccines that help save lives. Your dad helped with therapeutics like Regeneron and others. Your dad put in place the Stay in Mexico policy, built the wall, and he ended catch and release. Boy, a lot has happened in 6 or 7 months, hasn't it?
It really has. It's sort of amazing how quickly our country can degenerate with incompetent leadership. I mean, Joe Biden's only legacy, Sean, at this point is going to be showing America how good they actually had it under Donald Trump. The policies are asinine. Everything that you've been talking about the whole show are absolutely ridiculous. Imagine Donald Trump released 7,000 COVID-infected patients into a small town in Texas. Now, that doesn't cover the rest of the border, so it's probably that. Think of how much exponential spread of this disease is there because they're simply not willing to enforce rules against illegal immigrants. Americans, law-abiding American citizens, are now second-class citizens in their own country based on the actions of this administration, and it's disgusting.
You know, I can't really put it any better. But you're right, because mask mandates, mandatory vaccines now are happening, passports are happening. And meanwhile, we're not talking about just 7,000. There's now over 1 million since Joe Biden's president, illegal immigrants in the middle of a pandemic. Hardly any of them tested for COVID.
Because in New York City, for example, the largest demographic of unvaccinated people happens to be African Americans. And now you're telling them they can't travel freely, they can't go to restaurants, they can't live their lives because they don't choose to let the government impose restrictions on them.
I got to tip my hat to you. I got to tip my hat to you. You're a lot smarter than I am because you got the hell out of New York. I need to follow your lead, and so does everybody else. Anyway, great to see you.
Florida's a wonderful place, Sean. I'm loving it.
All right, now you're just putting the knife in and twisting it. All right, fair enough. I agree. I'm a dope. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us. When we come back, all right, legal troubles, they're real, mounting for Governor Cuomo, New York. Greg Jarrett talks about how real this is. The great one, Mark Levin, he's got a lot to say about vaccine mandates and mask mandates and passports. I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, the problem that he is facing, not impeachment, as a lot of the media in New York is talking about. Here with full analysis is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, you broke down a lot of this yesterday. Now it's not just Albany. Now you add Westchester. Now you add Manhattan. This now, forget about the politics of it. I don't see how he survives. On the legal side of it, the strong words of the Attorney General, now you have 3 prosecutors investigating. What happens from here?
He's in serious legal jeopardy. In the last 24 hours, Sean, 4 different district attorneys announced investigations into whether Andrew Cuomo committed crimes. They have primary jurisdiction because the accusers say they were violated by Cuomo in those individual counties, Albany, Manhattan, Nassau, and Westchester. And the possible crimes here are forcible touching, which is unwanted fondling, groping of sexual and private parts, assault and battery, and criminal harassment. You know, a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't the state attorney general bring charges given what she described as the overwhelming convincing evidence against Cuomo? Well, part of the problem is she has a conflict of interest because a division in her department is required to defend the governor in various actions. So you can't prosecute and defend simultaneously. So these 4 DAs have made a formal request for all of the evidence gathered by the Attorney General, and they'll use that to build their own cases. Now, separately, Sean, there's a federal investigation into whether Cuomo cooked the books and lied about the number of nursing home deaths in order to avoid a Department of Justice investigation. Well, the law says trying to prevent a government investigation constitutes obstruction of justice. You may have false statements and perjury as well. Finally, there's another investigation, Sean, into Cuomo's $5 million book deal, whether he used government workers to write and edit the book. The law says that converting government resources for personal financial gain, that is a crime. It's called corruption. And of course, on the civil side, all 11 accusers could use the evidence gathered to bring lawsuits for money damages against Cuomo and the state of New York for three things: sexual harassment, retaliation, and a hostile work environment. Those are the laws that the AG, Letitia James, concluded that Andrew Cuomo egregiously violated.
All right, Greg Jarrett, we'll keep updating the story as warranted, and we'll get back to it. But back to our top story tonight, the vaccine passport push, the border crisis, the double standard, the military vaccine mandate, now vaxxed and masked and ever-changing standards. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, along with Republican Congressman Jim Jordan. Mark, we start with you tonight. You know, I mentioned this to Don Jr. The policy at the border was working great. How come Joe Biden, now we're at we're on track to have a 25 or 30-year record of illegal immigrants at the height of a pandemic, thrown in cages, not tested, and dispersed all across the U.S., many of them high-rate COVID positivity. Can you explain that to me?
Well, obviously, there is no explanation other than Joe Biden is missing in action. Not only is he ignoring what's happening at our southern border, but he's ignoring what's happening in our city. He would rather support mandates and passports in New York and give the people coming across our southern border a free pass than anything else. When we look at, he's providing buses, he's providing transportation, he's even providing jobs, but he's not providing any protection to the American citizens against these people coming across. You know, Kamala Harris wanted to find the root cause of this. The reason she didn't go to the border is she only had to walk down the hall to the Oval Office. There's the root cause, Joe Biden and this administration. But it's really very hypocritical. But why should we be surprised out of this administration?
And you know what? 3 vaccines, the travel ban that the president, on 10 days after the first identified case of COVID, Jim Jordan, that was all Donald Trump. Regeneron, that's Donald Trump, too. That's saving lives now, especially with these breakthrough cases. How do I know? Because one of my friends, fully vaccinated, got COVID on Saturday, had a Regeneron infusion on Sunday, and he's feeling great. Here it is on Wednesday. That all happened because of Donald Trump.